You're listening to another episode of the Anna Vivo podcast. Thank you for your time.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Anna Vivo podcast. You are listening to a wonderful episode today, and I'm so honored and pleased that you are back with us today on a cold February morning. We are here and blessed with my uncle, Mark Boyd, which, if you had been listening to a recent episode by my grandmother, his mother, I had found out some interesting and terrifying secrets about my uncle. Namely, that's not your real name, Uncle Mark. What's going on here?
That's a good start. That's where I was going to start.
Here we are. Here we go.
So I was born in 1957, which makes me 65 at this point. My full name is Richard Mark Boyd.
You heard it here first. Here we go.
My father's middle name was Mallory, which is a family name. And they, mom and dad, both grew up in upstate New York, farming in mountain territories, where they, and maybe this is United States wide, but you could know someone named Junior still in their 60s, you know, and Grandpa was dead, but Butch still went by Junior.
Wow.
Or whatever. And they didn't want that to happen because they were a modern couple having a modern family.
In what year?
When were they modern?
Yeah,
I think they were modern probably around the time they got married, or maybe a little before.
And the 50s, modern 50s couple.
Yes.
They
Okay.
really were. I can see they're very trendy. Even now they're pretty trendy. Well, Grandma is.
Grandma
Yeah.
grew up in the western part of New York. So west of Buffalo, but not yet to Jamestown, the westernmost little town.
Uh-oh. You're not allowed to breathe.
Sorry.
So they were a modern couple
So,
at the time. They didn't
yes,
want Junior.
so the modernness was Grandpa Riefel, my maternal grandfather, had 3 girls, Patricia, Carol, and Joyce, and they went by all their life, and still, if Mom were to return, Pat, Charlie, and Joe. So Grandpa obviously was happy to have children, but thought they should act more like boys, maybe, or something. I don't know.
Because these were Pat, Charlie, and Joe, but they were 3 girls. Yeah.
Correct. You're catching my drift. So he told the girls the appropriate careers for them when they were considering college was teacher or nurse.
Just like
Probably
a good
there
50s.
was an asterisk there as in addition to housewife.
Ah, yeah.
So a very typical, generation at that time. My grandparents as adults went through the Depression. My parents as children were affected by the Depression. And those lessons still permeate down to the second and third, probably fourth generations. Who knows?
I would like to add in, this does resonate with me now that I'm living with Graham. Like, we save all of the plastic. I mean, we're on an island too, but also just growing up, I remember like you teaching us the importance of short, cold showers and saving gas. And even now that's not something that's really part of, a lot of people in my generation or younger.
Mm-hmm.
We have a very fast-paced, buy something new very quickly generation. So it's both mind-boggling and super valuable to see that in Graham and see that in you. I just enjoy that.
And so that's how you got your first name?
Yes, so I'm named, my first name is the same as my father's, but my middle name is different, and so I went by Mark all my life. So,
Interesting.
are we ready for a funny story?
Yes, we're ready. Now that the truth has been revealed and we can kind of all just breathe a sigh of relief.
I would say
from the
more
elephant in
of
the
the
room.
context.
Okay, more of the context.
Yes. I'm sure there's a technical term for that.
Sure, yeah.
Backstory. So, I don't know my exact time or my exact age. but
Where am
this
I?
This was in Northern Virginia.
Okay.
Woodbridge.
Yep. So,
So
I was in grade school.
Yes.
Somewhere
So I took a
K through
job
8.
at Home Depot, and it was really just a job to supplement my business and keep me busy because then you stay out of trouble. And at our store, there was a Richard who was important and got lots of overhead calls, Richard to the kitchen department, And there was an assistant manager named Mark.
Oh, no.
So those are my two primary names. So I said, all right, I'll go by Rich, which is what we call our son,
Right.
who is also named Richard Mallory. And I had a family, so I would take the early shift and open the store at, 5:30, or be part of that staff. And I'd be done by 2, and the kids weren't out of school yet, so it was easy to take a nap.
Oh, no.
One day...
Sorry, can I interrupt? Do you wish that your name was Junior then? Because then,
No.
there wouldn't be a confusion. Like,
No.
Junior to the aisle 5, to the hammer section, please, Junior. We need you stat. No? Okay.
Nobody ever called me on the overhead, and if we want, I can tell a story about that. So,
Anyway.
I was taking a nap. I got a phone call, and the person said, "Rich, what are you doing?" And being less awake than normal, I said, "Alicia, I opened this store this morning. I'm off." And there was a very thick quiet on the phone.
Oh, no.
And the person said, "Richard Mark Boyd,
Oh, no.
who is Alicia?"
Oh, no.
I said, "Mom?" "Oh, Alicia's my manager at Home Depot, and I thought she was calling to see why I was not at work."
This just shows that you've always had at least 2 bosses growing up. Or when during my
Yes,
childhood.
that is quite possible. The number would be almost manageable at 2. So, I live in the skin of Mark. I have no problems with being that. So, but the
And
funny...
have been all your life now.
Yes. Yes, in fact, when we moved to Denver, I thought, here's my big chance.
Yes, I'm a new
going
man.
to be Richard. I made, all my bank accounts are always Richard anyhow.
Yeah.
And it just didn't work. It didn't take. It kept sliding off like, gravy off of a duck.
Who's this Richard guy?
So the funny story, not the funny story, but, when traumatic or important events happen, people say, "Do you remember where you were when we landed on the moon?" Which I do. "Do you remember where you were when President Kennedy died?" Which I remember a few days later. "Do you remember when the towers were the planes crashed into the tower in 9/11? Yes, as a matter of fact. I was running a store in Home Depot and didn't realize that I was the only one there.
In the whole store.
And a guy ran by. Yeah, I thought, because I was at the service desk where you fix problems back in that day. And a guy went by and said, a plane just crashed into the towers in New York. And he was a joker, so I didn't think twice about it. And then about some time later, I thought, yeah, there is nobody in the store. So I wandered back to the break room, and everyone was around the TV and watching that. And so I know very clearly where I was.
I didn't know that story. I never knew.
Plus, your wife was also quickly exiting the scene.
Well, she had something that delayed her. I think it may have been medical or dental.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. She took one of our troublesome children to the dentist.
The most troublesome.
The most troublesome. We won't.
No, I don't think it was.
We
I don't think it was Richard.
You
Oh!
got zings.
That one. Okay.
That troublesome one.
And so she was on her way to the Pentagon late, and there's a, straight HOV lane after you get out inside the Beltway, and she's on it, and it is dead stop. And she saw the plane that would be the one that crashed into the Pentagon, and it was, I don't know the technical term, but not flying.
Hemming and yawing and
yeah,
pitching or whatever.
Not flying. Well, in sailboat terms, it was heeling way over.
Ah, yes.
And
Listing lazily to the left.
No, I would say drastically. And she said, that is not how planes land at Reagan or onto Dulles. And she, I don't remember this part, whether she then saw smoke, but she went on to the shoulder, got to one of those places where the police turn around, went south, grabbed the kids from school, and they went and watched and cried and stuff. I was busy with,
Home Depot.
Straightening out kitchen orders and
Yeah, I don't even remember. So I just remember Mom and I's story because she was coming to pick me up from the orthodontist.
Yeah.
And then I remember, binge watching the news for the next couple of days.
Yeah.
But at the time, the rest of the kids were an hour south in Fredericksburg.
Oh.
And so I think that they locked down their school and you had to go get them. And so I realize I had no idea what you guys were doing.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
So yeah, it's interesting hearing that part.
So I'm sure that is something you can cut because that's not any of the questions you meant to ask.
No, that was all good questions. I was just going to say, if it makes you feel better about the story, there are kids graduating college today that are reading about that event in textbooks because they weren't alive.
Sure.
Yeah.
Which is
so
sad it's not sad. It's normal. It's part of life. But
it is.
We were all in grade school as
So
well.
the Vietnam War ended, and the pictures you see of them evacuating people on the helicopters to the aircraft carrier, then shoving the helicopter off the edge because there was no room.
Right.
That happened just before I graduated high school in 1975.
Wow.
Yeah. So I was aware, of the end of Vietnam. And then not that long later, people are reading about it in textbooks maybe, but not having that personal.
Yeah.
I guess since you grew up military and you were 17 or 18 when you graduated, were you worried you were going to get drafted for Vietnam, like as an 18-year-old or?
I was not worried because I assumed, and I did, after. So I graduated in June of 1975.
Mm-hmm.
The war had just ended. I went to, but I graduated and I was 17.
Mm-hmm.
And then a few days later, I was 18. And I think in that September-ish, when school started, college, San Diego State University,
Shout
go
out.
Aztecs. Yes. I went to the post office to figure out how to sign up for, whatever that was called.
To enlist?
The draft.
The draft, yeah.
Hmm.
They had a long name. And they said, oh, you don't have to do that anymore. I said, oh?
Okay.
How come you decided San Diego State instead of Grandpa went to the academy, right?
Negative, Catwoman.
I thought he was a ring knocker.
Negative.
no.
Oh,
Uncle
no.
Clay was a ring
No.
knocker.
No, not Grandpa.
Yes.
Grandpa was, he only did 2 years of school out there and then went to Rhode Island for pilot training.
You're getting closer.
But
You're getting closer. So he did get his AA in New York, probably Binghamton or Bingham, New York, just down the hills from the Catskills. That's a guess. So at the time, they were allowed to become pilots. And then I think as the pilot program progressed, I'm guessing a little bit here, they realized, oh, these guys have to have a 4-year degree. And so that is why the Naval Postgraduate
That's why they went
School
back to
in
Monterey.
Monterey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and this touches, I guess, to my spiritual life in the sense that, so Dad had to go to 2 years of school in Monterey, Naval Postgraduate School, to keep his job in the Navy as a pilot. And so the chaplain there was really sharp, really good. And so that is my first real experience of church, because we went every week. And I do have a couple of remembering issue or, times that I remember going to a church in Rhode Island, our previous duty station. Quonset Point, if you watch the movie
Devotion.
Mm-hmm.
That was the same. Sorry, those were the same kinds of planes that Grandpa flew. Right? The same family of
Wrong
planes.
again, Catwoman. If you keep this up,
That's strike 2.
that's strike
Oh,
2.
no, good
You
thing
better start fouling off some. If you
I'll
wanna-
get a home run on the next pitch
Yeah,
for
she's
sure.
she's my Jamie from the Joe Rogan podcast, so she's usually pretty accurate on this stuff. But
My
to be
job
fair-
is to strike out and just keep asking questions. So
yeah, we're just gonna keep.
that's why I'm here. Anyway, we're talking about.
You're the quirky comic relief?
Yes, yeah.
Yes, okay.
Oh, the floors here are so clean. No, we're talking about. So I haven't heard much about Grandpa Boyd, so this is so fascinating
Okay.
to me to hear from you and from Graham. But Grandpa, so you're saying Grandpa became a Christian?
Okay,
In
no,
Monterey?
no, no. We have to back
We have to
way back.
Sorry, I'm,
set the scene.
So-
I'm just messing this up.
Right after Adam and Eve got kicked out of the...
Oh goodness,
Oh,
Dad!
man.
This is.
Oh, fast forward a little
yeah,
bit?
no, okay.
So
Qantas, Rhode Island.
1957,
No, Rhode Island. Let's go back to where we were.
Little Mark and Big Bev were born in San Diego.
Wait, you're older.
Yes.
Yeah, you
Why
can't
do you
say
say
big.
li-
You can't
you
say
can't
big.
say Little
Bev.
Mark
That's
and
not-
Big Bev?
that's not
You're
good.
older than she is.
Oh, okay. The first two.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Big Mark, Little Bev. I think you just got it backwards.
So Grandma and Grandpa got it right at first. Mark and Bev were born. San Diego.
Okay.
Here
Okay. First duty station. Out to Rhode Island for 2 duty stations on the same location.
Right.
He was on the aircraft carrier for one part of it, and then he was
pilot training
No, he was pilot. He managed something on base.
Oh, he wasn't an instructor at that time?
I am not aware of him being
Okay.
an instructor. No.
Anyway, so he's 2 times
Anyhow,
at
so
Newport.
so we were there in Rhode Island for 7 years, as I recall. Then we went to Monterey. Then we went to Virginia Beach. Then we ended up in San Diego. So that's the short of that. So the 2 years in Monterey were, for me, the beginning of my spiritual awakening. It started at a summer camp, Mount Hermon, and I came home so I was there in the 5th and 6th grade in Monterey. And I came home from the first summer and said to Grandma, I did something at camp. I threw a pine cone. I don't know what I did, but she said, "Oh, you got saved. You probably got saved."
Wait, what was you threw a pine cone?
I
at
don't
us?
know.
Threw a pine cone into the fire. That's
the typical
And
thing.
then the
Youth
fire
rallies, they
spoke
do.
to you and
Yeah.
said, "Come follow
No,
me."
no.
Usually
What
at
I
these youth
really-
rallies, they have you write your stuff on a rock or a pine cone. They
Yeah.
say, now let it go into the fire.
Yeah.
Jesus will burn it up.
Yeah, that's a good point. I forgot
Some
about
kind of thing that you can
Kumbaya
remember.
sort of
Oh.
situation.
Well,
Okay.
I didn't
I'm
remember
tracking with
any
you.
of that. I did remember putting pennies on I had probably had a penny on the railroad tracks so that the trains that go by would squish it.
Oh my goodness! What
I
a
don't
rebel!
remember. Huh?
What a rebel!
Oh, I was
Rebel rouser.
I was merely a follower.
Bev was the rebel.
No, I don't remember Bev going to camp,
Oh, okay.
Mount Herman, because if I was in 5th grade,
This is the mid-60s.
she would have been in 3rd or 40.
Mid-60s.
Yeah, 63, right? Because you were born in 57. You said you're 5th grade. How old is 5th grade?
I know.
9
What are
years
you,
old.
19 or 20 in the 5th grade?
Yeah, so mid 60s.
Yeah, 19 or 20.
Anyhow, whatever that
Mid-60s.
age. Anyhow, I can remember grades. I can't remember age, except for 1 or 2. So I came home, blah, blah, blah. Mom says, "Oh, you probably got saved." I think she was more definitive. But and there was a thing going on. It was in chapel. It was called For Pete's Sake. It was a Billy Graham movie, which, is about a guy on a motorcycle who's a rebel and then...
We had a similar situation called Extreme Days. That was our age movies.
Okay.
Same sort of thing where this young, hip, rebel guy turns to Jesus and becomes
Yeah.
saved. And now it's
Yeah.
cool for you, too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and then my parents were involved in Officers Christian Union, which became OCF, Officers Christian Fellowship, I think.
Mm-hmm. Still around.
And Mom had already accepted God, accepted Jesus in college, I think. And so she had a foundation of a relationship, I think. But for Dad, as I remember the story, he had a calculus exam, and all they could take was a 3x5 card with formulas on it, probably both sides.
Mm-hmm.
And if he didn't pass this class, he'd lose his job and his career, which he loved. And so he prayed, "God, if you're real, I need to pass this class."
Mm-hmm.
And he did pass. I think back in that day, 69 might have still been passing. I don't know what he got, but I had the impression he squeaked by, which is the story of my academic career. Can't we pass this guy? We don't really want him in this class again. And, he became a Christian and took it all,
That was when you were in 5th grade. Is when he became a Christian.
5th or 6th grade, during that time. I don't know the exact
So
time.
you became Christians kind of at the same time.
No. I became a Christian later on,
After.
which I will tell as we progress.
Yeah, I'd like to follow this thread.
So,
For-
Dad, this is the thing. He smoked cigarettes. I remember from, earlier, Rhode Island, the previous thing. He smoked Kent, which had a little castle on the package, So, that was very clear. He wasn't, I don't think, a chain smoker, but he smoked. And he and another person, as I understand it, they were sitting on the steps outside or something, and they said, "You know what? We don't need to smoke." And they stopped.
Wow.
Dad stopped. As I understand it, I never saw him smoke again.
Wow.
Later, as an aside, I was probably out of college or late in college, and we went golfing with some friends, and this guy we were with was going to putt, and he handed Dad either a cigarette or a cigar, and I was like, "Don't touch that! What are you doing?" It was like such a shock.
Yeah.
You've touched that. Don't smoke, don't drink, don't chew, don't go with girls who do. What's going on here? So it had been long enough, from 5th grade to college, 17th grade.
Yeah.
That I thought, wow. As another aside, don't stop me if you've heard this one before. When the change of command for him to leave as skipper
Right.
of the squadron, his last real assignment, they did at North Island just the same thing that you saw in the old Top Gun. They're all in their whites and they're in the sun around some sort of facility like a cabana, thing, and they're celebrating. And there was this picture. They all lined up. Everybody's standing there with a glass of champagne. And Dad is there with those little crystal glass cups with red punch.
Oh, neat.
And I thought, man, that is it. So I was, I don't know when he, changed out of the command in end of 74 or early in 75. So I'm either at the end of my junior year or in my senior year of high school.
Yeah.
And I thought, that is a cultural stand,
Wow.
But that was that was a heart change. I think
Absolutely.
Graham has some stories, even when she was pregnant with you, of Grandpa going out to the bar with his buddies the night before she gave birth, and she had to call him in, which I hope that this doesn't create a sense of shame, because I don't think there's any shame in anything he did, but she just has some stories of no, maybe I shouldn't say this, but she told me a story recently. I just really don't know Grandpa Boyd, so all this is so interesting to me. But she said one time, the guys got him from, they were all hanging out at a bar and brought him home, wouldn't let him drive home, which was great. But she made him sleep out on the porch until he could get himself in with the keys. I was like, oh, like the grandpa that I hear about is the grandpa you're talking about,
Sure.
of he drank punch. He was, straight up and fly right,
Oh, yeah.
But I
Well-
think that really speaks to, a heart change from
Absolutely.
God of
That was, so one of my favorite characters in Scripture is Abraham. And if you look at his life, there's a lot of things you could say, you swung and missed on that one,
well, and he was one of the first to figure out learning who
Well,
God is. There were a lot of other gods at that time. He was learning who God was for the
I think
first time.
Adam and
for
Eve
human-
had a good handle on who God was. But he is a person who followed his father, left where the family was, went to a place, father dies, and God says, you're going to keep going. That part's not exactly correct for Scripture, but I think
So that's what happens when
reading between the lines.
My dad went to seminary, so we're going to go deep and
I
get the details
don't
right.
tell people that I once was in a cemetery. Okay, so, but there are faith points along the line. But so the thing is, Abraham had powerful interactions, a few interactions with God, and that's what drove his life, to the point where he could say, I don't know how this is going to work out, but I think God could even raise my son from the dead. And it's counted as faith. So I'm not going to go any further because I'll get into trouble. But he is one of my favorite characters.
Huh, I never knew that, Dad. Can I ask you another question? I know there's so much I'm learning about you in this
Can
podcast.
we edit this part out? Okay. Axe away.
I also didn't know that. So, the Boyd family, your dad and mom and you married my mom, which is the Alexi family, and they met during their tour or stay in Rhode Island.
Yes.
And I didn't know. So when Grandma Boyd, your mom, had 4 kids, Grandma Alexi, mom's mom, they were friends, had 7 kids or whatever. I don't know how
okay.
many kids she had at that
I don't
point.
have that many. Okay.
Anyway, the point is they were friends, and Grandma Alexi, mom's mom, asked Grandma Boyd, your mom, if she knew who Jesus was. And Grandma was like, yeah, I do, yeah. And then she went home and she was like, actually, maybe that's a good question. And it was a turning point in her life, just from Grandma Alexi. Grandma Alexi's a pretty stubborn woman, she shoots it straight.
Edit all this out, right?
Sure.
Stubborn in a good way of like, I don't know, Joyce, do you know Jesus? And she did that to Grandpa. That's how Grandpa became a Christian. Like, you say you're a Christian, do you know Jesus? Grandpa Alexi, her husband. So that's what I mean by stubborn in a good way. And so that was like interesting for me now to hear. I've heard that story in recent months, which I didn't know before moving here, but that happened before Grandpa you guys moved to Monterey.
Correct.
I wonder if that had an influence in your dad then becoming a believer too. I don't know if we have any documented.
You never know.
Connection.
We'd have to talk to the fount.
Yes.
We'd have to talk to Grandma about that. But my guess would be, looking at culture then, that it might not have had a big impact at that time.
But Grandma's also JoJo, and she strong-willed, trendy lady in the 50s who probably...
Oh, now you're opening...
a can of worms.
No,
Here we go.
one of my... sorry. One of my other heroes, I would say, my parents were...
Technical difficulties.
Go ahead.
So...
Oh, much better. That's perfect.
Mom that's Grandma Boyd, Joyce, is a very strong person. And from her, I learned that commit to the process and you will do it. Remember when we did karate and we had to learn how to break a fall? Mm-hmm. And you slapped the ground?
Mm-hmm. Over and over again for 10 years, yeah.
And the people who couldn't do it couldn't commit to
the fall.
The process.
Oh, I didn't even think about that, yeah.
And the ones that could slapped and survived.
Yeah, and then it became just an instinct.
It did.
Yep.
So when your grandfather, my dad, would go out to sea, that would be when Grandma would take us to vacation in New York, and we'd see Grandma and Grandpa in Walton.
Alexi?
No.
Oh, yes.
My dad's parents.
Okay.
So my paternal grandmother and grandfather, we'd see them in Walton, which is in the Catskills. And we'd see my maternal grandparents, the Riefels, Ansel and Esther, in North Collins. And so the Riefels, Grandma and Grandpa Riefel, would go to Canada to fish for a week on their vacation. So we went to North Collins we got there the afternoon that they were leaving that night to drive to Canada. And when they left, Mom put on her top hat and orchestrated a renovation in the house to knock a hole in the front wall and put in what looked like a pretty big window at that time. It was probably 3 foot by 3 foot,
Nice.
which was where Grandma would sit and sew. And so she did this. And so when they came back, it was like, what is this thing that has happened? How did
you were
this
out
happen?
fishing. Sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. She's
And
this trendy JoJo. Every time
Well,
she raised a whole troop of kids.
Yes.
Every time
yes.
Grandpa was on deployment. She's a trendy lady.
I think that part happened after he came back from deployment, but
Well, that's
But yes, she was alone in, anytime he went to sea, she was in charge and
Sailing the
did
ship at
stuff.
home.
Yeah. So
That's what's so interesting to me. Graham is such a tiny, petite, sweet woman, but she's also packs a punch. She's powerful. She runs a tight ship at home. It's really interesting as a mid-30s lady moving in with Graham because she has all of her systems in place, which is why she's so independent at 87. It's really great to see. But I am so fascinated by your dynamic because you're the oldest son of 4 in a Navy family. So Graham definitely ran a tight ship while your dad was out at sea. But I feel like you were, what's a second in command or the right hand man, also.
mhm.
And you see that a lot, I think, in your family dynamics. And, you walked Bev down the aisle after Grandpa passed away. And, you really step up over and over and again as the firstborn with a lot of compassion, too. I see that when you told Graham about the accident for Tahiti, just a lot of grace and responsibility. And we've got 2 firstborns in the room, so maybe you can add in on.
Not qualified yet.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm just curious what your experience was when your dad was on deployment, Dad, and what Graham was like, and what it was like for you, and what it was like growing up in a Navy family too.
Well,
That's a big loaded question.
Yeah, try and unpack that one.
Tell us your whole life.
yeah, it's the only life I knew. And I guess by personality fit in, I am, as they say, a mile wide and an inch deep in as far as relationships go. I'm an
extrovert. Yeah.
I am an extrovert, so I have met people at restaurants and Home Depot and gone into business with them, so it's easy for me to work with people. So the moving stuff was not hard for me, to go to a new place and meet new people and be friends with them and then move on. As I've heard other people tell their story, that it was the hardest thing, and that they still keep in touch with their friend from first grade,
You're like that too, though. You're fiercely loyal. You have your Wayne Wilson from high school. He came and lived with us in high school.
I keep moving around and trying to
family
lose
did.
Wayne, but he keeps latching on.
Oh, so that's Wayne's fault.
I think
You're not. I think you're also fiercely loyal.
well, to Wayne, yes.
You show up to all your family members.
Wayne and Arlene, they're my buds. But Dave and Kristen, Dave, you're my friend too.
Yep.
I mean, You are my friend.
I think you're an ambivert. I think you make friends with everybody and bring out the best in everyone. You just, naturally push people to be their better selves, but also you are deeply we'll edit this out later. I know it's super emotional.
Can't let anyone see behind the curtain.
I know.
Right.
I have an image to uphold. Dang it.
But yes, you're also fiercely loyal to so many people in the sense of rescuing, but also like being a solid foundation for people or just being a friend that I feel like, you have some really solid friends that you've kept forever and for your family members too. So
we'll take a break here.
Oh, no, I was just saying edit that out.
Anyway.
I was giving the cut the mic. So I was responding, yeah, we're going to die.
Mayday, mayday.
All right, let's pause real quick here.
Ready?
Go.
Okay. So Monterey was the beginning of my spiritual walk in the sense of being in a good church, getting all these, learning these things, and Mount Hermon, quality camp.
You threw a pine cone and saw Jesus. Sorry.
Yeah.
No, too far. Okay.
No, it's just that you are writing on the margins of the scripture, and you shouldn't do that.
So that's when you were in 5th grade. Yeah.
The next assignment was back on the East Coast, Virginia Beach. Dad got assigned to the USS Bonhomme Richard, a smallish
ship.
A smallish aircraft carrier in comparison. And it was old, probably came in, after World War II.
Yeah, it's an amphib is what that is.
Yes, yeah, it became a helicopter and but at the time it was the floating White House. So everything that went on in the White House and probably, under NORAD and other places, who knows, also went on in this aircraft carrier, so that if they had to put to sea and that if the president had to land and run the White House at sea, they were ready.
I'll look that up here.
So that was a 1-year gig, and after these things that happened in my parents' life in Monterey, yes, they put me in Norfolk Christian. So we were in Virginia Beach. I rode the bus for about 30 or 45 minutes to Norfolk and went to my first Christian school, 7th grade. All of us went to the Christian schools, but I was in the middle school at the high school in Monterey. And that was 1 year, and then we went to San Diego, and I went to Christian High of San Diego in San Diego.
Wait, where was the Bonhomme Richard when it was
Virginia Beach. It was, or Norfolk.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I only ever knew it in San Diego when it came around. And that's the one that they that sailor just lit on fire recently, a couple years ago. $1.2 billion fire.
I will trust you on that.
It was all over the news during COVID. There was a different story, but yeah, the Bonhomme Richard is no longer with us anymore.
Really?
Yeah, because of the fire.
Okay.
On purpose.
Yeah.
So anyway, but that's cool. So
tough way to get out of the military service.
Well, yeah, I know, right? Different topic, but
what is this? This is Kansas? Why am I in Kansas?
Right.
Or did he die?
No, he was put on trial and actually acquitted had some very good lawyers.
Wow.
And there was a lot of other people that were fired. Yeah.
Well,
of course, as expected, but
well,
anyway, so sounds like a long history, clearly. Set up as the White House on the East Coast and then came over to the West Coast. I had some friends that served on it, and then more recently this fire, just this last couple of years.
Ships last for a long time.
Yeah. So anyway, so you're now in San Diego. You're at this Christian school.
Yeah. So no, we were in So we're in Norfolk, Virginia Beach area, and first year at a Christian school, and then transitioned to San Diego for my dad's,
Twilight tour.
Yeah, I don't remember if he was XO first, and then I don't think so. I think he went as skipper,
Okay.
so wait, I take it back, because that was Vietnam. So he had a tour floating off Vietnam, flying a 2-engine prop
S2.
Grumman, yep, S2F. F is the model number, or whatever.
The fighter part of it.
Hardly.
With the propeller.
Yeah. Two propellers.
Yeah.
So he had 2 tours. So he might have been an XO first and then a skipper. I don't really even remember. That was the thing about having a parent in the Navy that goes on, deployment on a ship. You see them.
Mm-hmm.
Life is this way.
Yeah.
I'm pointing to my side. And as deployment gets closer, like let's say 2 weeks away, things get tense.
Mm.
And as a kid who's not necessarily tuned into things, all I know is, wow, the air is getting tense here.
Mm.
What's going on? And now I know they're working things out, this has to be done and this has to be done. And,
right.
Are you going to be safe? I'm going to be safe. Are you going to be able to handle the budget? I'm going to be able to handle the budget. Don't forget to
coming back to marital bliss.
Well, this is on the way out.
Oh, yeah.
They're coordinating, divvying up. Okay, You're going to be safe. That's your job. Okay, yep, I'm going to be safe. And you're going to keep the house running. Don't let most of the kids die. Hey, 50% is passing. That's how we look at it. And so just knowing you're leaving for 6 or 9 months, that was a tense time.
Yeah.
And then they're gone. Dad's gone. And everything is just back to, it's a different commander, but everything's running smoothly like it did a month ago. And everything's fine. And then all of a sudden, hey, it's getting tense around here. What's going on? Dad's coming home. We got to make our beds, clean up, whatever. I don't even remember that. I just remember the 2 times it was tense was right before he left and right before he returned. And it was just, here we go.
It's changed. Normal part of being a human.
That's right.
Everything
a new
changed.
election. We got a new, guy in charge and whatever. So that's just part of the process. And why in the world are we? You're going to edit this part out.
I want to hear you're in the Christian school in Virginia Beach.
Yeah.
I want to hear your story of coming to Christ. And how that affected then where we are today.
Right. So somewhere in the 7th grade in Monterey, in Virginia Beach, Norfolk Christian, I learned to read. And what I read was...
in the 7th grade.
Yeah. What I read was Run, Baby, Run. And there was 2 or 3 of them like that. They were stories about... I could see a guy who went to the gangs in New York City, and they got saved. Yeah. Some of them got saved. Nicky Cruz, maybe, got saved, and somewhere between leaving Virginia Beach and arriving in California, I was sure that if I went to a public school, you know, gangs were going to feed me drugs and I was going to be in a gang. And,
Yeah.
you know. And so when they said, hey, you know, what do you think about this Christian school? I said, thank you. I wanted to live, you know, to be 14. You know, and that was the context and so it was no question if they gave me an option, you know, that I thought, oh yeah, this is the way to survive. I'm going to go to a Christian school.
It was more of self-serving survival
I
Christianity
just had a
at the time.
picture.
Yeah.
I just had a picture of the world is going to heck in a handbasket, and I think I should try and survive.
Right.
I did. I just read this stuff, and this was my picture to the outside world that, you know, oh, yeah, you're in a Christian school here, so you're safe, you know. But this picture of New York City, slum life, that's where it is really everywhere. Because California, you know, have you heard of the Beach Boys? No, actually, I haven't. But I did. So, well, that was later. That was later, once I got there.
Your fall from grace.
No. I wasn't in grace yet. So we went to a good church, you know, and they, at some point, it's very hard to tell what that time was because there's 11 and a half months of summer in San Diego.
You can't really tell time.
And there's 2 weeks of rain, you know. Which just happened to be around Christmas time.
Yeah, it could
be. So I know it wasn't at Christmas time, but, you know, we had this sermon, and it scared me. I thought, Mom thinks I'm saved, but they seem to think I need to know that I'm saved. And if I really answer the question under oath, I would say, I don't know. You know, I went to a Christian camp. Is that good enough? And so, you know, that bothered me that Sunday. And the next Sunday, they had, I guess, who knows what, because it was a Baptist church. So, just as I am, 14 verses. And we sat pretty close to the front. So it was like, all right, let's stand and sing. Oh, who's this coming down the aisle already? You know, it's like... And Dad was right behind me, so that was fun.
Cool.
I mean, that was good. So it was me and Art Peters and Dad.
Nice.
You know, bam.
And that was your altar call.
That was my altar call.
Okay.
That's what I point to. Even though I can't tell you the date, I can tell you the location.
But was that the time that you recognized a change in your life as well?
Oh, no. No, not
so
really.
when was that? When was the time where you said, okay, God gave his son Christ, he is actually the Lord of my life, not just the Lord.
Well, I was making him the Lord of my life.
At that time?
At that time, yes.
So when did you recognize that change? Or why, I guess? I guess that's a better question of why did you not recognize the change at that time then? Versus, you know, academic versus experiential. Yes, I realize he's the Lord of my life, but when is the change?
Well, he was in like seventh. How old were you? Like high school?
I was in eighth grade.
Yeah, so there might not have been a big change. I feel
No,
like that's
that's
normal
right.
around that
That's
time period
right.
to be like
That's
to
right.
understand yourself a little bit better.
I
Be
would
like, oh.
say I was making sure that I was making a conscious decision. But as far as behaving like a Christian, seeking Christian things, wanting to know, I was already in it. We had a very good youth pastor, Jeremiah Rife, Pastor Jerry, and he made disciples.
Awesome.
And the thing about that, in fact, I'm just going to riff slightly outside of the pages of Scripture, but I would say you could probably look at the disciples' stories with the exception of, we fished all night, buddy, you know. but for you, I'll throw this net on the other side. All of the disciples had some sort of come to Jesus moment where he did touch them, on a emotional, spiritual level that said, oh, I don't know what's going on, but I'm going to follow this guy, at least for today.
Right.
And I think there are probably way more conversion stories that go along that line. I can't really point to a place where I realized I was a slave trader and that I was, needed amazing grace and, that kind of thing. Like my father, he had a culminating kind of watershed experience of salvation. He prayed, God answered, and he said, from now on, as for me and my house, we will follow the Lord. So in a sense, my salvation, conversion, started when his did.
Yeah, cool.
So a little bit like the centurion that said, hey, everybody, line up. This is it.
Yep.
This is what we're going to do.
Yeah.
And I think if I may make a comment to the church, we need to be more aware of some people grow into it than get spanked into it, like a baby being born.
Right.
And who knows whether that's part of personality or just how God works in our lives. But, part of it's a reflection of how we have a positive impact on society. Man, we're getting in there, We have an impact on society, and we change society, and we draw people closer to God. And then God says, oh, let's have a little faith experiment here because you need to grow, and I want you to know more about me. And so I want you to take your son to the mountain and sacrifice him. Dad, where's the ram? Aren't we taking a sheep? God will provide. Or he'll raise you from the dead. So we see these things in all of our lives. We see these in many parts of our life. And so when someone who I think has made a genuine profession of faith to start following Christ as a 4-year-old, and later has a crisis where God is speaking to them and saying, you might not be following as closely as I would like you to follow, so let's consider this.
Yeah.
And they have another come to Jesus moment. Well, I try to help them understand and how spiritual life starts and develops. If we look at, there are verses that, say, hey, God's doing something before you even know it.
Right.
Yeah. And we can look at the picture of how a baby, my personal view is there's a baby that starts before it even knows it's a baby. It's alive. It lives 9 months in mom, and they can't see me do air quotes, can they?
No, you're doing air quotes, but we all know that it's not your personal view. It's science.
A sarcastic air quote.
and it's
it was a sarcastic,
yes.
so I should go like this or something?
You believe it's living in
Yeah,
mom.
but the point is, a baby is born.
Yeah.
And then there's still a period. I don't remember what it's called, but all of a sudden they recognize themselves if they're looking in the mirror.
Right.
They recognize, oh, that's me.
The Turing effect of
Yes.
why AI can't realize that they're conscious, because they don't realize that they exist. But there's a point where you realize, where real life realizes that itself is aware of itself.
But
the
they
existence.
still do my job better than me. Anyway.
The what?
Oh, the AI?
Oh, the AI. Yeah.
So the point is, in my mind, as I look at a parallel to spiritual things, is in the spiritual life, there are things going on that we're not aware about, that God is drawing us to the point of being able to see
Yeah.
in the mirror and say, oh, that's God working
Right.
in my life.
Right.
So I try and just help people not beat themselves up when they get to that 14th come to Jesus, which, I mean, honestly, if you use the example of, a shot glass and then a juice glass and then a tumbler and then a liter mug, they're full when they're full. The state of being full of their, in the case of a glass, their capacity, there's some parallel there in spiritual things. We could only relate to God depending on the size, the capacity of our faith.
Mm-hmm.
And then as we grow, or as a challenge exceeds the capacity of our faith, we grow again. And those are all come to Jesus moments, because we can always say, thanks, I'm getting off the bus at this point. Thankfully, God loves us enough to say, I'm going to let you off. I'm going to go around the bus and I'm going to pick you back up. Around the block, because you're going to get back on the bus, and things like that. But
Yeah.
Can I just say, I hate to squeal on myself, Dad, but I have made little jokes about how good of a person you are, in the sense that you straighten up and fly right. You do what is expected of you. Maybe it's because you're, the number one kid in a Navy family. So you have a strong sense of justice and what is right and moral standard, which I really appreciate. And you have a strong sense of grace. And I feel that towards me. I know you gave me a little side glance when you were talking about some of that stuff. And that's true. I think that you model that to so many people in our family and in and outside of the faith. I feel like I've seen that my entire life, where you've been very gracious to people and met them where they're at, and tried to model Jesus' love with wherever they are in their understanding and struggle of life and God and themselves. And I think that's a really beautiful thing. Not everyone can have one foot in each camp.
Perfect. That sounds like a good spot for a timeout, and then we'll jump back in for a little bit more there.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Ana Vivo podcast. We welcome your feedback and ideas. You can learn more about us by simply Googling the word Ana Vivo. This podcast is supported by listeners like you. I am a licensed real estate broker with Compass Real Estate and a nationwide real estate matchmaker. We consult with you for free, find and vet the right real estate professional that specializes in the area and niche you need, are paid by that professional, and they get clients like yourself who want and need their unique specialty or winning track record. If you or someone you know is in the market to buy or sell real estate anywhere in the U.S., don't simply web search the highest paying advertiser. Let us use our licensed experience to find and vet the real and best professional for you. It costs you nothing but a phone call or email with me, and has saved my clients financially and emotionally. I'd be honored to serve, and you can reach me direct by email at tim.c.miller@outlook.com. And as always, to God be the glory.